2, 1. Several clergy.
Creflo was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of Global Atheist News Review. As usual, we have our panel of opinionated people, and here they are. Welcome, Guy, Frank, Tercia, Ty, and Dread from your various locations around the world. Yeah. So, and the hat too. Yes, welcome to the tricorn hat. Thanks, Dread. So here we go. Pitching straight in. The news items this week may have a familiar ring to them. So starting with this one from the US. Thousands gathered in Washington, the capital, marching through pouring rain, risking arrest. Who's got background noise? Is that you, Frank? No? Somebody's got background. It's not me. Oh.
I don't hear it. What does it sound like?
It's conversation. Dread stopped it, I think. Yeah?
I'm in the basement.
Carrying on. Thousands gathered in Washington, the US capital, on Saturday, marching through pouring rain and risking arrest to protest over the reversal of abortion rights, which happened last month, of course. Chanting, "We won't go back." Protesters converged on the White House, with some tying themselves to the gates outside. An estimated 10,000 people from all across the US gathered, and one of them was an attorney from Dallas, and she said she'd traveled 1,300 miles, and she said, "There's nothing to me more worth fighting for than this cause, our fundamental right to have bodily autonomy. If that means taking up space and getting arrested, then I think it's worth it." So there you go. There's all sorts of things happening in response to the reversal of Roe versus Wade. What do you think about that, guys?
Well,
Can I ask our American members a question? Because I was wondering whether it would not be better to tie themselves to the pillars of the building of the court, because as far as I see, the White House can't really do anything about the situation. Am I right in saying that? Maybe you can explain it to me. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're protesting in the wrong space. Maybe they should go somewhere else to protest.
So I'm sure there are protests more than just at the White House, but also it is how do you get what is a protest? It's a statement, and the platform of the statement is really meaningful. And so who knows the address of where the courthouse for Supreme Court is?
Yeah,
and who knows where the White House is? It's like most people know Pennsylvania, like they know that from the back of their head.
Okay.
So it's much more representative. Not only that, but like we also have a White House that's sympathetic to the protests, and they probably maintain it there much longer for more people to see it, to show solidarity for the travesty that occurred, and by a decision of 6 people.
Dread?
Thanks, Tom.
yeah, I was going to say that.
You're muted, Dread.
Oh. Yeah, I was going to say that, and I can still hear somebody in the background there. It was nice when Tercia was mentioning it, that it was pro-autonomy. You know, again, getting out of the framing of the far right, who call it pro-choice and pro-life, and then actually talking about it the way it is, and that's pro-autonomy.
Absolutely.
Real nice.
Yeah. No, nobody is anti-life. That's just the way they want to paint us. Yeah. Anybody else want to react to that? Okay, moving on then. You may remember that former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was fatally shot. And this is very rare in Japan because they simply don't have guns available. In fact, the shooter had to make a gun to do the job. And he, in fact, tested his homemade gun at a facility that was connected to the religious group that he harbored a grudge against. This is suspect Yamagami Tetsuya, who told investigators that he believed his mother's financial problems were due to the Unification Church. You may remember that the Unification Church is a religious movement founded in 1954 by Korean Reverend Sun Myung Moon. And the group's followers are colloquially, exactly, they're known as the Moonies, and the church has widely been described as a cult by former members. Well, on Sunday, a Tokyo-based representative of the Unification Church confirmed that the suspect's mother is indeed a member. So how weird is that?
Well, what's really weird is that he would shoot Shinzo Abe, who wasn't a leader in that church, wasn't well known as a member of the church himself. Why shoot a former head of state? It just makes no sense at all. And the man is totally unhinged. Who did the shooting.
It's about as sensible as shooting John Lennon.
Exactly.
I mean, what struck me is that the way some cults try to extract money and successfully extract money from their adherents in large quantities could, it seems to me, result in financial problems of any of those members, and therefore it is a bit of a random thing that this happens to be the Moonies. It could easily be some other extreme cult next week.
Indeed, and we have an item which is redolent of that later on in the show. Tessia.
I have a little bit of a different angle. What struck me about that news is not so much the person who committed the crime, which is a terrible loss. I mean, I think Shinzo Abe was a leader that the world needed. But what struck me about the news item when I did a little bit of research is that South Africa, that is a very religious country, something like 82% of the population are Christian, and we have a murder rate of between 55 and 65 people per day. And Japan had a death by gun violence rate of in the single digits per year. So that struck me that Japan, that is not a religious country, has hardly any murders, and South Africa, that is this very religious country, has this incredibly high murder rate. So maybe that's just something that I'd like to throw in there as well.
Absolutely. Well, the gun lobbyists, of course, will say that in Japan there's murders, but they're all done by sword or knife or something.
I don't even think that's true.
Yeah.
My point is a bit more meta. I remember when the thesis statement is we should be really careful because we know we like to overgeneralize as part of our human nature. And so when things like this occur, it'd be really good if the person who did it or the perpetrator stayed as general as possible. That way, people who are in the same mindset don't get inspired by the fame and the notoriety that comes with doing a terrible act in public. I remember when the Boston Marathon bomber immediately became the front cover of Rolling Stones. Because he looked like a young kid and people were like, hey, this might sell some magazines. And I'm like, what a terrible decision, but also what a poor reflection of how we conduct ourselves in the face of tragedy. And I would think, yes, this guy did a terrible thing, but he also has a family that might be related to him that didn't do a terrible thing that could be easily connected. For example, his uncle or a cousin who's tangentially related to him might be like, hey, you have the same last name as this kid. Are you related to this guy? Well, now you're a terrible person. It's like, well, now I'm under threat, even though I've done literally nothing. I think as news, it'd be really cool to see first steps towards like non-identification and letting the due process take place. It's not that the information isn't available. It's just that we shouldn't go through additional steps to promote those kinds of people. That'd be my thought.
Essentially, changing the names to protect the innocent, right? Just like they do in TV shows and stuff like that.
Yeah. We certainly don't want to stimulate copycats, do we?
Yeah.
Anyone else? You done on that one? Okay.
Done.
The Islamic government of Iran plans to supply Russia with potentially hundreds of drones with combat capabilities for its war in Ukraine.
Wow.
So the Christians and the Muslims are fighting fellow Christians now.
You know who your friends are, don't you? It's weird. The company they want to keep.
I mean, I think I'm right in saying that the same drones are also being used by the Ukrainian side.
Are they?
Can anyone confirm that?
Oh, I think that's
I
true,
believe so.
but it's true, but they're not being sourced from Iran. I mean, drones are drones, and there's
a drone called the Bakhtiar. There's a drone called the Bakhtiar, which sounds like an Iranian name, which I believe is being used by the Ukrainian side. Now, I mean, it seems to me that that the West are beginning to equip the Ukrainian side with drones and other weapons, and it seems to me to be a sort of arms race going on. Sadly.
Yeah, I think the news is, or what makes this news item important is that it's another member joining into the conflict.
Yeah.
And it's not an ally of the United States. Well, you could argue that Iran is an enemy. It's just
a riot state, anyway.
Yeah. And so this war between Russia and the Ukraine is expanding, even if the soldier strength is remaining the same.
Yeah, it's non-combatants now coming into the fray, right?
Right.
Political. It's a political thing now. Not that it wasn't before, but
it's growing that way.
Yeah, lines are being drawn, and people are joining teams, and
It's not helpful, is it? No.
No.
Going to Ireland, Northern Ireland, in fact, there's a Sinn Féin councillor. Now, the Sinn Féin are the ones who want a united Ireland. They're against the UK having a piece of Ireland. Anyway, one of the Sinn Féin councillors in Belfast has had his children questioning him about something they've seen on the internet, which is a picture of a bonfire. Because, of course, this time of year, the Orange March happens, and they all celebrate, what is it, the Battle of the Boyne or something that happened 400 years ago that they can't let go. And it involves building bonfires and setting fire to them. And this councillor has had his politician's poster, because it's left over from an election. They're sticking posters on the bonfire in place of, we would use a Guy Fawkes in the UK.
An effigy.
To burn them with a sort of political message. And his children, they're quite young children, have asked him, why, Daddy, are you on a bonfire to be burned? What do you think of that?
This is all new.
It takes up the theme we had a minute ago, which is about the impact on innocent people of actions. It's very similar, same sort of theme, isn't it?
Yeah,
It is. Yeah.
things don't happen
Perhaps
in
I
a
should have
vacuum.
said. Perhaps I should have said that the Sinn Féin associate with the Roman Catholics, whereas the Protestant Unitarian people, the ones who want to belong to the UK, are more they're Protestant, both Christian, of course, but have been traditionally at each other's throats.
They're unionist rather than Unitarian, I think.
That's the word. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
the only sorry, Guy, I was just going to say
Oh, go ahead.
the only comment that I can make is that despite all our years of being religious, it seems that religion is still not solving any problems. It's still continuing to be part of the problem instead of the solution. And I just wonder when are people going to stop trying to use religion as in any way something that can solve our problems.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
It's just part of the problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's like in any soccer game. Both sides are praying to a god to help them score more goals on the other team. And it doesn't matter what side of a war you're on. If you're invoking a deity to support your cause, you're just as dumb as the other guy.
Well, there you go. You see, I'd separate the soccer game example. I'd say that, it's okay to support a soccer game and have a favorite tribe, as it were, because it's real. The men do struggle against each other.
That wasn't the point I was making. It was that
no,
the players will pray to a deity, or when they score a goal, they'll kiss their whatever their religious token is and thank God instead of the skill and the training and the dedication and all the rest of it that they put into it and their team did. It's got nothing to do with God. So
and that's exactly the point, because God is not real as far as we can tell.
Yeah.
So they're wasting their time just making unnecessary tribal disagreements.
Right.
So this guy, this councillor whose face was on the bonfire, he's said, this is not culture. It's a hate crime. Those with political unionism need to show leadership and stand up against this sectarian hatred. He's right, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds right to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you could imagine in other circumstances where book burnings were quite, prevalent. That, say Charles Dickens had kids and his books were being burned on a bonfire because they were considered, vulgar or whatever. His children might ask the same question: Daddy, why are your books being burned on the bonfire? Same thing, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Just throwing this out too, there seems to be a running theme here. It's not about the action that's taking place on the face level. It's the messaging behind it that needs to be addressed. And whether it's in this story or where you choose to protest, or even for the last story where it's like Iran supporting or sending drones or potentially doing it, it's like it's not that Muslims and Orthodox Russian Christians are suddenly getting together. It's that there's an underlying message of America, pay attention, because we don't like you together, and we're willing to work together in order to, to just send this as a message. It's not that we agree; it's that we both have a similar commonality there. It's
the friend of my enemy is my enemy.
Yeah, it's the messaging that is always striking to me. It's never the actual, black text on the headline.
Well, I'm a bit stuck now because my mouse has just gone to switch itself off.
I can give you the next story.
Yeah.
Can you? Oh, great. Yes, please.
Messenger, pulling it up. Guys, love talking with you. Pulling up. Let's see.
About the Pope confirming Catholic education is evangelization. I think.
So I have. Yep. Pope confirms Catholic education is evangelization with an S.
Oh, that's good. Well, good. Somebody's seen some light.
Somebody's
That's
catching on.
fantastic.
Was there ever any doubt?
I think the Pope thinks that that's a good thing.
Well, and that means you get it tax free now.
Evangelization as a form of indoctrination, and certainly I was subjected to it for some
likewise.
18 years, and I don't think it's a good thing.
Right.
Well, I just wish that we could make the same kind of. Sorry, John.
I'm just going to say, what's good is he admitted it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Well,
He doesn't think
I'm
it's
just hoping that we can make the same kind of progress in South Africa, because I had a very interesting conversation on Friday with a teacher in Worcester, where I reside, and he, in as many words, he told me that he knows, being in the small town in the education circles, that no school in our town will employ me because I'm an open atheist.
Yeah.
And it's sort of uh, I wasn't surprised to hear that, but I must say I was a little bit disappointed, because I didn't think that in this day and age it could still be like that. And that's because nobody in the world that I live in acknowledges that churches that have access to evangelizing school children are indoctrinating them.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I wish that the South African education officials would just do what the Pope has done, and admit that they are committing that kind of religious indoctrination, and keeping people like me out of a job in the first place. And more importantly, I can really make a contribution to the youth and the children of South Africa. But there's one reason, and it's because I'm an open atheist, that I'm seen as a danger to the religious indoctrination.
Yeah.
So good Pope, good Sir Pope. Good.
Well, I
Hats off to you.
don't think the Pope meant what we are reading into his statement.
And I was going to say the same thing. Is like, it's unfortunate he didn't qualify that statement with a little more explanation as to why he would even make it. I mean, certainly each side of the issue agrees with that statement, just as a patent, an obvious statement. But why make it if the interpretation is positive to either side of the group? It just,
I can fill you in.
I don't know, it generates conflict in my view.
He does make an attempt to justify it, but he digs himself a deeper hole. This is what he said.
Well, this is what I'd like to hear now.
Well, I've finally got my mouse working again. He has compared not speaking the truth about God to burning books.
Tercy, I did want to make a point. You had mentioned that people won't hire you because they think that you are a danger to religious indoctrination. And the fact of the matter is you are a danger to religious indoctrination.
That's
just
true.
as you are very much a danger to ignorance or bigotry of any sort, because your duty in life, both through your vocation and through just life principles, is to shine light where there is a lot of darkness. And
Absolutely.
you should continue to do that. That's how you know you're doing a good thing. When people are like, well, we're afraid to hire, it's like, good. That's how you know you're actually making a difference.
Thank you, Ty.
It's just that sometimes
I feel better
the consequences of doing the right thing in that respect do have pretty serious implications. I feel it myself as a Pastafarian. So
Absolutely. So if you want a reference, Tercia, there's Dr. Ty. I can give you his contact details.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure I can get more than Dr. Ty. I'm sure you and Dred and Frank and all of you, but that's not going to help me much here.
Well, you certainly had a fan yesterday on our Free Thought Hour show.
Sometimes I get lucky.
Anyway, finishing off with this Pope told this gathering of the Christian brothers to evangelize by educating and educate by evangelizing. So, I mean, he'll be telling us that he's Catholic next, won't he? It's nothing new there.
No, just remember, the Catholic Church in particular is a authoritarian organization, and they believe government should be the same way. And in fact, they believe they should run the government.
of course.
So,
And
in view of that,
You got 2,000 years of that.
yeah, exactly.
This is an awfully nice government you got going on here. It'd be a shame if anything happened to it. That's
Yeah,
John, may I be very presumptuous? And while we're on this topic, because the last news item that you have, if you don't mind, Lauren Boebert is caught openly trying to destroy the Constitution. And I find, while we're on the topic of governments and the Roman Catholic Church,
yes.
I find it deeply ironic that I'm sure Lauren Boebert is not Catholic.
No,
She's probably fundamentalist evangelical.
Yes.
And yet she's perfectly happy with a Supreme Court that is has something like six Catholics on it. And she does not, I mean, the relationship between the United States government and Constitution and the Catholic Church is a very, it's quite an interesting relationship, especially in the light of this news item about Lauren Boebert and the abortion Roe v. Wade. So I'm sorry, I confused your order, but I think that these two things are sort of connected. I don't know what the Americans will have to say about that.
Absolutely connected. It depends. You see, it's all right in her mind for her church to direct the American government, but it might not be all right for the Pope to educate her children. What she said is, she said churches should preach how churches can influence the government. Those are her words. And she's also said she's fed up with the Constitution because it separates, it's secular, it separates the church from the government.
You know, it's interesting, and again, this goes back to Tercia's point of the connection of these stories, in particular with the Iran supplying drones to Russia in support of their effort. It's like, all Christians sort of band together against atheists, but then if they got rid of all the atheists, then they'd be fighting amongst themselves as to who was the right Christian religion. You know what I mean? It's like the enemy or the friend of my enemy is my enemy, and until I get rid of them, you're all my friends, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
So we've had a little bit of an interesting event over here. Of course, we've lost Boris from government. He's no longer prime minister, and we now have a contest.
He is prime minister. He's still prime minister.
Oh, true. Yes, that's true. Technically, he's a lame duck prime minister until the Tories finish their process of electing a new leader, who will then immediately become prime minister because they're the party in power since they won the last election. It's a complicated nonsense, our democratic system. But what's interesting is the person who triggered Boris's downfall, former Health Secretary Sajid Javid, was questioned about what prompted him, after so many years of being okay with the disgraceful behavior of Boris, and he claims that he turned a blind eye, or he gave the benefit of the doubt a lot of times. But what prompted him to finally stop doing that and actually resign, he says, was when he attended a sermon on integrity at a prayer breakfast in Parliament.
But John, the Spirit works in mysterious ways.
What amused me about this incident, if you watch the video, you'll see what I mean. When he's in this interview, when he's explaining, he says he's embarrassed to explain that. So he says it may sound a little strange, and sort of does a chortle, because he knows he's speaking to a broadly secular electorate. So he realizes that he's treading on thin ice by saying that this sermon stimulated his action. It's not going to win him any votes. Or not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to know a bit more about this prayer breakfast, because I mean, these Christians are insidious in Parliament.
Yes.
You know, was it an
Guys.
interfaith prayer
Yeah.
breakfast? Because isn't he a Muslim, Sajid Javid?
What was he doing
what's
there?
going on here.
Exactly.
I would just like to make a point again. Like, you could watch a sermon about fire being hot and it still be true. Like, the point of this isn't so much that, you know, sermons are always wrong. Like, sermons typically deal in truthisms to begin with, and it's more of a question of just
true.
like, why are elected officials in a largely secular area going to prayer meetings in the first place? Sure,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
probably like the
definitely.
more concerning point. And then I'd say, like,
Yeah.
whatever they say in sermons are typically, when it's emotionally based, it's meant to trigger something. So, like, okay, whatever he was ignoring in himself was finally, you know, he had a moment to reflect on it, and that's good.
Yeah.
You don't have to assign.
That's a good point.
The other flip that Christianity does is flip that recognition of human behavior and consequences of your own action and says, well, God did that to you. It's like, no, we're totally capable of doing that ourselves. So good that you figured something out and chose a better option. You don't have to accredit that to supernatural or anything. Any pep talk would have worked well in that situation, is all I'm saying.
Yes, but also, Dr. Ty, remember that God can strike a straight shot with a crooked rod.
Well, that's just unfathomable.
I think he might have to exist first, Tertia.
Yeah. That's probably the critical point there. Yeah.
Anyway, sticking with sermons, popular televangelist and megachurch pastor Creflo Dollar, and his name is a clue. Yes, his name is a clue to the wealth he's accrued and the way in which he's accrued it. But the news item is this: he's renounced his decades-long teaching on tithing, the practice of giving 10% of one's income to the church. He said, after making, you know, a personal magnificent fortune from tithing over the last, 2 or 3 decades, he has now come out saying tithing isn't required or even encouraged for believers in Jesus Christ. He says, I encourage my flock to throw away every book, every tape, and every video I ever did on the subject of tithing, because it's not required by Christianity. It was required in the Old Testament, but then, of course, Jesus came along, and he didn't say that the previous laws were wrong. What he said is, I've come to fulfill them. And somehow, I'm not sure how he manages to make that word mean this, but somehow it means that they've been finished. They were never wrong, but now we don't need to follow them anymore because that's over.
But notice he didn't offer to give any of the tithing.
Because that would actually constitute restitution.
I think the whole thing, to me, seems like this is just his way of saying, I'm retiring, and I don't care whether you support the next pastor that comes along or not.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is he retiring?
Messages.
Well,
what would be funny is to see if his followers actually, if his donations actually increase as a result of that.
Well, you're right, Frank. He didn't apologize for his past errors.
Well, I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that he didn't say that the teaching on tithing was wrong, in that it said only give 10% and that it should have been give 50%. So he could have done that. So at least I was waiting for that part, you know.
Anyway,
so I've just looked him up. He's 60, so it sounds a bit young to retire. But have you heard that he's retiring?
Well, no, but it's clear he's not expecting or asking for any more money. In fact, he's found a way to say, hey, don't send any more money.
I think it's reversed. I think there's some reverse psychology operating here.
That's what I
I'm
think too.
convinced. It's reverse psychology.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
It'd be good to see.
We'll have to wait and see.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. We should watch his sermons for.
Absolutely.
Check in on him for a while.
Yeah. See what his revenue is over the next few months, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Staying with America, the Gallup polling
Can I make-
organization.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was wanting
Gallup.
to make one. I want.
Okay.
I'm waiting for the day for the adult industry to take over terms that are in church language. So like, I want tithing to be like a naughty thing, and that way pastors would have to be like, "Please tithe." No, not the thing you do with pogo sticks. The part where you give me 10% of your paycheck. Yeah. I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page here. Anyway, next chapter.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Gallup, the American polling organization, they've been polling people for their views on the Bible and on religion and their activism and so on since 1976. And the latest update it reveals, I'm going to screen it here, it reveals a decline in people's views of the Bible as the actual word of God. And if you take a look at this graph, you'll see that some people have previously thought religion to be very important, and the number there is in the around 60%, and it's going down, and it's now down to 44%. And then another group of people who think that the Bible is the actual word of God, they have dithered about a bit and gone down a little bit from about 28 to about 20. So this is movement in the right direction, surely.
Now, it doesn't look like much, but those are statistical, significant drops, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
on the order of 20%.
Yeah.
I mean, a 10% drop in the middle of a 100% scale, right in the middle, is the equivalent of 1 out of 5 in
Yeah.
effect.
Actually, if you had designed the graph so that the y-axis had more and the x-axis was a little shorter, that would have been way more graphic.
More exactly.
Yeah.
Well, if you take a look at this second graph that's come from their data, here we've got the people who they're divided up into categories. So we've got the whole of the US, and they think that 20% of them think that the Bible is the actual word of God, whereas 49% think that it's the inspired word of God, and 29% think that it's actually an ancient book of fables. I'll be in that group. That's the total population. When you break it down, Christian adults, 25 of them think that it's the actual word of God, 58% of them think it's the inspired word of God, and only 15% think it's an ancient book of fables. And if you look at other religions and no religious identity, it's only 6% think it's the actual word of God, 26% the inspired word of God, and 65% think it's an ancient book of fables. So again, we're going in the right direction, surely.
Absolutely.
Some good news.
Yeah. I've been encouraged to offer a little bit of good news at the end of these shows, and that's it. So I'll save the item on Australia because we covered it a bit last week. And it's just a reinforcement of this problem that they've got where their government proceedings currently open with a devotional segment. So you remember we covered that before.
Yeah.
So thank you very
I'll
much.
try
Brian.
and dig up some more dirt on Canadian issues.
Yes,
and
please.
Get some juicy news out of Canada here for you.
Absolutely. Yes, you've been a bit silent, you Canadians, because you've more or less got religion under control in some parts.
I'm bringing them all to Quab.
You rake them up straight. Yeah, we'd like to hear from you.
John, we still within our time limit. Maybe if you will grant me permission, can I say something very briefly? It touches on the LGBTQ issue, and also as far as the news, basically the one item that maybe I missed it, but the LGBTQ activists were arrested for defying the ban on pride marches in Turkey. So maybe I can just plug something that I'm working on here.
Yes, please.
And
You've
that
got
is
10 seconds.
I've got 10 seconds. So I'm working on transcribing conversations that Jordan Peterson has had with people like Sam Harris, Susan Blakemore, and Matt Dillahunty. Because I don't know if you guys are aware that Jordan Peterson, who has a lot of influence, has made this major dramatic leaving Twitter ban thing. And hopefully I can share that with you guys. It's a very enlightening to read those conversations. So I'm working on that. And that might be something that we could have a nice panel discussion on at some stage later on.
Well, Jordan Peterson, as you are aware, is Canadian.
Yes.
Well, I'm gonna get over there and give him a punch in the head.
Yeah, please do.
He's also under quite how shall I put this, severe psychiatric examination.
Well, it doesn't seem as if it's hampering his progress, because he now also has his own show on on Newsmax, and his profile and his influence seems to be growing. So whatever else you're doing right, Captain Dread, you're doing some things wrong too. Get all of your people.
I'll check it out.
Sure, there's 50,000 Jordan Petersons in the world. It's the people who follow Jordan Peterson that are the problem. Okay?
Yeah,
exactly.
Similar
it's the followers that are the problem. When you want to point at one person, you can take that person and replace them with another crazy, crackhead the next day. Yeah. It's the people who are willing to follow. And why are they following? Because they have an inability to exercise critical thinking and skeptical thinking in the proper way, because we don't have an environment that fosters that kind of thinking. Yep. We need to make sure that we foster that, because that is why you reduce the followers that follow the crazy people that come into town the next week and the week after that. It's up to us to be able to do that.
Yeah. Which is a cue for me to plug the Free Thought Hour. We had 3 educationalists chatting together last night. Take a look at that. It was a bit of fun. Guys, you've been fantastic, like I knew.
Thanks for having us.
Bye then.
Several clergy.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guy?